moving on to looking at an audit that was done of a sub-postmaster under investigation, or a sub-postmistress under investigation. And ultimately a case was brought and she was found not guilty, so she wasn't even convicted of it, but despite that did lose her business and was declared bankrupt. There seems to be some issues with the auditing process, and it does seem like the sub-postmistress in this case was more than happy to comply with the process and explains the difficulties that she's had with balancing, but that doesn't seem to spark any concern, or much concern, within the post office, that despite the fact that she could usually resolve the balancing issues, that these were a weekly occurrence that she was having to contend with and deal with. Let's jump straight into the inquiry.
That document can come down now, thank you. Turning please to your involvement in the criminal investigation and prosecution of Maureen McKelvey. Maureen McKelvey was prosecuted for theft, contrary to Section 1 of the Theft Act Northern Ireland 1969. The sum of the theft was said to relate to was £4,623 and 48 pence. The theft was said to have occurred between the 1st of September 2001 and the 21st of August 2002. Mrs. McKelvey was tried and found not guilty by a majority verdict delivered on the 16th of September 2004. Nonetheless, she lost her business and was made bankrupt. I'd like to start, please, with the interview of Maureen McKelvey, which you conducted with Mr. Thorpe as second interviewing officer on the 4th of April 2002. Could we have that on screen, please? It's PNI 701, and it's page 50 of that document. I don't think we have the right page here. Page 50. That's it, thank you. So we can see here the date, the 4th of April 2002. You and Mr. Thorpe are listed as the interviewing officers. Although Mr. Thorpe appears first here, you seem to be listed first in the continued record of tape-recorded interview. And I think it's right, isn't it, that you were in fact the lead investigator in this case, notwithstanding the order of the names on this?
Yes, that's right.
Going please to page 52, the background to the case is summarised by you about 2/3 of the way down the page. And you say, and my friend Mr. Thorpe and Mr. Kenny, the auditor, we arrived at the office this morning about 8:30 and introduced ourselves to you. And I stated to you that I'd asked for a special audit to be conducted this morning at the Clanbogan Post Office because of accounting irregularities reported from Chesterfield. We went into the post office and you opened up. You produced all the cash and stock to the auditor, and an audit was conducted by Mr. Kenny, and you were present during the audit. You were also advised of your legal rights and that we'd be interviewing you on tape recorder once the audit had been conducted. I also explained to you that the office would be closed and would remain closed until our inquiries had been completed. You were also advised you could have legal representation or phone someone from the Federation. Going then please to page 54.
So just going on furthermore from that, I mean, she confirmed that, but then Suzanne went on to say, and you contacted your solicitors, then the audit commenced this morning. Mr. Kenny found £40 of discrepancy that had been 112, so you were happy enough with the audit and how it was conducted and what the findings were. Yes, there does seem to be a small discrepancy, nothing like some of the astronomical numbers that we've seen in other sub-postmasters cases so far.
The third question on this page is from you. So if you can just talk me, and if you can come towards the end of the week and you're doing your cash account. And the answer is that's Wednesday, yeah. And you say, how do you go about preparing everything for your cash account? Maureen McKelvey says on the Wednesday, you say yes. And then Maureen McKelvey gives an account and says, well, usually we try to. We're supposed to close at 12:30, but we don't really get closed because in the country community people keep coming. You're trying to do your audit now. Gary Grugan was in with me on one of the days when I was trying to do my audit, and he realised, that people do still keep coming and expect you to serve them or take stuff off them while you're doing it. And you do that because it's expected of you, and that's the way it's been. And you try to audit and do everything. Put everything out to go through. it at different stages on the computer and bring it all to a balance. Now, it doesn't always balance first time, as we all know. You might have to go through the stuff again and check it all and redo, and some of it, but that's normal procedure, and you try to balance as close to it as you can. Also, we have an account with Camp Hill Community, which they buy a lot of stamps. They post a lot of parcels to foreign countries, and we put money down on their account for them for the stuff they get. Scrolling down, please. Out of the post office, so we have to try and work between each week to what they have got, out in postage or stamps, and try if you're short. That's probably where it is. You go and look. It's probably where it is at the end, or you've made a mistake and you have to go back and check it, which I always do. But some weeks, if I'm out, the next week it usually balances itself out. It's neither big amounts here or there. I know it will balance itself out, and I'm happy enough with that because I'm the ones who's doing it, and I know if it's a mistake made. I know I have made it and just a simple mistake, and it will all sort itself out the following week. But that's the way I do to the best of my ability, and I don't do anything wrong as far as I see. So Maureen McKelvey was telling you here that she sometimes had trouble balancing, but that where she couldn't find the cause, she would expect it to balance out the next week. Is that right?
Yes.
And this interview was taking place less than a year after you interviewed Mr. McLaughlin. Did what Maureen McKelvey was telling you here, that you didn't always balance first time, that you could be short, you'd look for the reason why, you'd expect it to come out in the wash, in essence. Did you link this at all to what Mr. McLaughlin had told you in his interview, in particular about his problems balancing with the Horizon system?
No, because Mr. McLaughlin's problems with balancing was due to staff.
I think she said dishonesty there, didn't she? So she's still establishing, in his case at least, that it's due to staff dishonesty, which is interesting.
Going please to page 76 of this document. This is the second section of the record of tape recorded interview following a short break after the first part of the interview. And about a third of the way down the page, we have just before the completion of the interview, I just want to confirm a conversation that I had with Mrs. McKelvey this morning, where Mrs. McKelvey, you produced a bundle of 12 paid pension and allowance foils with an ad list paper clipped around them, and the date on the ad list was 4th of May 2001, timed at 17:52, and it was cash account period 07, and you had stated to me that you had found the bundle of foils last week in an envelope under the counter in the post office. Is that correct? Maureen McKelvey says yes. You say you also stated to me you had intended to contact the post office to advise how you were going to get rid of the bundles of foils, and because of the Easter period as yet you hadn't contacted anyone. Is that right? And she says yes, and goes on to talk about that. And then about 2/3 of the way down the page, we have from Mr. Thorpe, FT, we can have with us, paper rustling, the foils to be checked to date. Would you like to examine these foils again? That's with the tape recorder off whilst you do that. If you would like to examine them in any way, and Maureen McKelvey says no. Mr. Thorpe, to see if there's anything on there that you can suggest there has been a problem. Maureen McKelvey, are these foils wrong, you're saying? These the ones from? And you say, from this schedule. Maureen McKelvey says, no, that's okay, no, they're okay. And scrolling down, Mr. Thorpe says, week 48 there, just Maureen McKelvey, if it's there, like, I can't, you're saying it's on the paper, that's it. You ask, have you anything else you'd like to say, Mrs. McKelvey, before we conclude the interview? And then over the page, yes, I do believe I did everything to the best of my ability. I've been doing this for 11 years and I've done it right. If there's been an error on the computer, question mark, I've just done that. I didn't mean to do it. That's all I can say.
Sounds like she's saying I've tried my best, and if there's an error or something you're suggesting wrong, then I'm kind of willing to admit that there's been some kind of error on the computer, whether it's her fault or the computer's fault, but nevertheless she's saying, I didn't mean to do it. That's all she really knows about it. She's kind of established that she feels fairly happy using Horizon, but she's not saying that she's any kind of expert with computers.
So Mrs. McKelvey had been saying that she was content she wouldn't find an issue with the paper copies of the documents themselves. That's right, isn't it? Towards the end of the bottom of the last page. Is that your understanding of what she was saying?
Yes.
But here, this reference to error on the computer, given what Maureen McKelvey had told you towards the start of the interview about sometimes having trouble balancing, not being able to balance first time, did this give you any pause? Again, particularly since this was not the first sub-postmaster who had raised the general point about having trouble balancing on the Horizon system.
At that stage of the interview, from what I recall from the papers I've received, the documents I've received, Mrs. McKelvey had been saying that she'd had no bother balancing, and that if she had any problems, she would have contacted John McKenny.
I mean, presumably both those statements could be true in the sense that she seemed to be implying if there was a problem, I'd find it, I'd fix it, and it would then subsequently balance. So both those statements could be true insofar as I don't have any problems balancing, I managed to get there in the end. But obviously she has further gone on, at least in the taped interview, to turn around and say, but it's not unusual for it not to balance the first time. And presumably the post office investigators are putting that down to human error versus system error, even though there is some suggestion from sub-postmasters that they're not wholly convinced that the system is necessarily functioning as it's intended to do.
So it wasn't really a highlight because she had said previously, I think during the interview, that she'd had no problems balancing. And as we had always been told, the Fujitsu system was reliable.
Does it follow that after the interview you didn't discuss the relevance or otherwise of either the difficulties of balancing in general or this reference to the error on the computer with any colleagues or seniors to see if anyone else was struggling?
It was always discussed. The Horizon computer system would have been discussed between other members of my team, whenever I'm saying the North team, even with auditors, with trainers, we would have discussed the Horizon system. And I remember I challenged the Horizon system on a number of occasions where the sub-postmaster had said to me that everything was okay. I had done the investigation of all the items that I would investigate and I could see no problem. And I would have asked, what about the Fujitsu system? Especially on one occasion whenever I had problems myself with my own computer. And someone was able to go in remotely and fix my computer. And this was the first time I'd ever seen something like this happening. And I raised the question, I remember clearly raising the question with casework. Can Horizon be accessed remotely? Because I could not find out what was wrong in an office. And they said no.
Even though they've kind of demonstrated to that they could. I mean, it wasn't clear there whether she was talking about just a standard kind of non-Horizon computer or whether she was talking about a Horizon computer there. Presumably she might be talking about her own computer that she uses at the post office, and that sparked a thought, oh, well, if they can access this computer that we use, can they also access Horizon?
So at all times, whenever you were interviewing, you were thinking that the computer was 100% reliable.
And that is sadly a mistake that many non-technical people make. There is no computer system, I'm going to say it again now, there is no computer system that is free of bugs. There is no computer system that is 100% reliable. Humans build computers, humans program computers, humans make mistakes, therefore computers also are prone to error in the same way that we are, because we are the ones that code them. Computers will execute what they are told to do, but logically that code is not always correct.
Can you recall when you raised that question of casework?
I would have said, I know where I was sitting in an office. I moved office location, but I remember it would have been sitting in the Royal Mail House in Belfast. So it may have been about maybe 2006 through 2007. I was surprised that this could be done, and I immediately thought about Horizon and could this be remotely accessed, and said no. And you have to remember, I'm being told no by the post office, who is the government. And it just did not enter into your head that this was wrong information.
Did you consider requesting audit data from Fujitsu following the interview with Maureen McKelvey?
I do not recall. When was that? 2002? I don't recall.